Welcome to Retirement Rescue Radio, a show specifically designed to help retirees and pre-retirees maximize their financial efficiency so you can live the retirement lifestyle you've always imagined. Your host is Nate Miller, investment advisor representative and author of the CPR Retirement Rescue Roadmap. Nate discusses thoughts and ideas from some of today's most knowledgeable professionals in the field of finance. He offers strategies along the way to help you make better financial decisions so you can maximize your retirement. This is Retirement Rescue Radio.
Hey everybody, Nate Miller, founder of Miller Retirement Group and your host of Retirement Rescue Radio. We've got another episode here today. We've got Dave Jetson that we're going to be interviewing. And Dave is a national and international speaker, workshop developer, and author of several books. Actually, Finding Emotional Freedom, Access the Truth Your Brain Already Knows, as well as the one we're going to be talking the most about today, Setting True Boundaries, how to create respect, safety, and freedom in relationships. And it's going to be with a financial bent because his team building presentations for businesses and organizations also affect on how individuals' emotional history affects the work environment. And he's created a lot of different workshops, including the psychology of money, financial codependency, couples intensive with money, freedom from negative self-talk, the evolution of codependency, and boundaries. And we're going to talk about his pioneering in offering both individual and group experiential counseling. He also does this via the internet and using video conferencing. That's allowed him to develop an international presence with about 30% of his clients outside of his local area, even outside of the United States. And his work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Investment Advisor, Self, QI, the Journal of Traditional Eastern and Health and Fitness. And he's a member of the Financial Therapy Association, American Society of Experiential, I'm going to mess that word up over and over, American Society of Experiential Therapists, a member of the American Counseling Association, a national certified counselor, and a member of Nasruddin, which is an organization of financial planners and therapists. And so we're basically going to be talking about financial therapy today. And make sure you stick around to the end where he really explains the difference between positive and negative consequences versus punishment or reward systems, and how the positive and negative consequences and how you approach that, even the language you use, can help out with your kids, with your grandkids, anybody that you might need to set boundaries with. And then make sure you stick around. He'll give ways to get a hold of him, free books also that you can get from us as well, just by, I believe, leaving a review and then copying and pasting that review into an email at asknate@retirementrescueradio.com. And then we'll be able to send a book out to you. And we got a limited supply of those to do. So we're just going to do that until they're gone. So that is it. And so without any further ado, please enjoy my interview with Dave Jetson. All right, Retirement Rescue Radio listeners, I'm your host, Nate Miller, and we have another great episode, very special episode today because we have David Jetson here. And Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, thanks for coming on. And, we just went through a long list of credentials of yours, but is there anything that is either unique or something that you do, hobby, something you enjoy that people can't necessarily find out on the web?
Well, I like riding bike, and I this weekend decided to ride from my house to Mount Rushmore. If those are familiar with the Black Hills, it's a lot of uphill riding. So I like the challenge of that. And I proceeded to even go towards Custer. If you know. Yes.
Well, anytime you put mount in anything, it's probably not going to be a level.
Sure.
How far is that ride?
Well, the ride I did, I ended up doing about 35 miles.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I think the farthest I've gone so far, I bought a bicycle last summer. The farthest I've gone, I think, is 14 so far. So okay. Haven't even done a full marathon on a bike yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I have.
Got it. Definitely. Yes. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, David, are you ready to help rescue some retirements today?
Sure.
Awesome. Good deal. Well, the first thing I would like to ask, because we're going to be talking about financial therapy, financial counseling, but what what the heck is that really, to start off with? A lot of people might not exactly know what all that entails. And so could you describe what financial counseling is, what you do, and really what led you to get into this industry?
Sure. Well, I'll start off with what led me to get into this industry, and that was a financial planning friend of mine, Rick Kaler, asked me if I wouldn't help him work with clients because he says, we put these wonderful portfolios together and they don't follow through with them. Saying, well, why not? Well, it was really about the emotional piece. Well, people like to make it about the money. I guarantee you it's never about the money. It's about the emotions that are behind the money. And so what I do is help people see where the emotional obstacles are in their retirement planning and that type of thing, and actually create strategies to create workarounds. For those that really want to, we can get into the emotional aspect and try to change that emotional outcome. And that many people aren't really interested in that, but they are interested in seeing workarounds. And so when I work with financial planners, I've done that. I've actually sat in on financial planning sessions with other financial planners to help look at the emotional pitfalls, if you will, and try to address it right within the session.
Yeah. And I was really drawn to this because I feel like an emotional reaction to money for me very early on in my life is probably a very, very big reason I'm in the industry that I'm in. My first memory of money was telling my mom that she could sell all my Ninja Turtle video cassettes if it would help out the farm.
Wow.
And because even at 6, I didn't know what the heck was going on at that point, but I could tell something wasn't quite right because they were selling the things you don't normally sell. Like it wasn't harvest time or it wasn't the cattle, but there was a lot of like personal effects. Right. And so that I guess was, my little way of helping out.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point. When I work with people and I lead workshops and that type of thing. And one of the, I'm doing right now is on financial codependency. And what's really interesting is the patterns, the way we interacted with money as a child does impact the way we interact as an adult. And what's interesting is our first money memory experience might not even be associated with money. It's about something that has value. And just like what you were showing with your Ninja Turtle set is it had value. And so you want to help it. So I think it's a wonderful example.
Yeah. I don't know how much value it had to anybody else, but yeah. And now I feel like there have been, and I've recognized this, a lot of scripts I've had to flip in my own mind in order to even get where I'm at when it comes to money, because I realized that there are probably certain habits or certain mindsets that I had that probably weren't the most conducive to being successful. And so how would you help someone that, I guess I'll give an example of some of the things that I normally see when I'm sitting with people, is if somebody has been very, very frugal their entire life, and now it's time for retirement. And most of my clients have done a really good job saving. And so they have money to spend. And we've created a great plan that they can see how they're not going to run out of money, but they still have trouble spending that money. They just can't do it.
Well, that really ties in what I was talking about a little earlier is financial codependency. And what I mean by that is when in this case, the money is more important than me. My self-worth is low. And so I had put my self-worth into other things. In this case, it's money. And so how do you help people really relax around money? It's really about helping them feel that they deserve it or matter enough in order to be able to do that. So that's an emotional process to see how did I learn that I didn't have value or matter.
Is there certain things that you might help them go through in order to help change that mindset?
Well, that's a deep mindset, and that one's going to be a difficult one to change unless you really want to get into the deep emotional work around that. And so this is where it's really about, if I'm coaching a person, I might work on doing some exercises that with a different mindset. What I find what will help people many times, if they have a reason for doing it, like reason for spending, they can't spend it. People that really are spendthrift can only spend the money if they have a reason. I don't know if you ever found someone who really wanted a car, for example. You know, I have a Tesla, for example, and there are a lot of people like that. Like, the only reason I can get that is because I'm helping the environment,
Exactly.
or that type of thing. And so this is one of the things as a financial planner is if you want to do a workaround, it'd be more about how do you give them a reason for spending the money that helps them.
So is that like a justification for spending the money?
Correct.
Okay. So something in their mind. And I guess once again, I almost feel like this might be just like a session between you and me, but I know a lot of people are going to have some issues and maybe they haven't gotten over them yet. But so that right there, I think I had it on the tip of my tongue until I had to go and explain, the people that may have not have gotten through it yet. And now I can't remember what that is. But maybe I'll just go a different direction here, because the ability to the reasons, yes, the justification. So I found that memories, vacations are a reason to spend money, because if you buy a bunch of plastic stuff, the plastic stuff can break. And so, but memories, and unless you get, Alzheimer's and finally forget, but that means that those memories are probably going to be with you at least the majority of your life and your kids' lives and stuff like that. So creating memories has been one place that I've been told by a lot of people to actually loosen the purse strings a little bit, because those are going to be the things that people and your kids and your family are going to remember. And that was something that I had a really hard time doing as a kid, was because I put so much importance on money. I mean, growing up the way that we didn't have any of it. So anytime somebody tried to help, it always felt a little bit like charity. So I had a trouble receiving it. And then as I got older and actually more financially stable, I realized that, I like giving as well. And I can't give to someone unless they're willing to receive it. And so then I had to be able to receive stuff as well. So do you find in retirement, possibly that could even still be something that someone might deal with?
Oh, definitely. All the patterns that you have through childhood, adulthood will go into retirement unless you deal with the emotional piece associated with it. And so, because that's what we've been taught. We do what we've been taught. And from an emotional perspective, that pattern plays out until we die or until we reset it.
Okay. And so have you seen this industry that you're in, this financial counseling, this financial therapy, have you seen this industry grow in recent years? And as an expert in the field, do you feel that this is something that is needed like on a day-to-day basis with people?
Well, I believe it's very beneficial and helpful. And yes, it has grown. There's two organizations that I'm part of. One is NAS Rudin, which is a bunch of financial planners and therapists that get together and just explore the emotions associated with money. And then there's the Financial Therapy Association, which actually is a lot of professors and people, planners and therapists in the profession that really want to bring this out in order to help enhance the planning for retirement for people.
Okay. And so what's interesting, I find about this field, at one point I thought about majoring in psychology, and now here I am a financial advisor. And so do you see that financial advisors should I be taking psychology classes to help people with financial therapy, or should there be a separation between the financial advisor and someone like yourself?
This is a question that's being continually explored in the Financial Therapy Association. What I personally find is I think it's really important to have this separation. Both professions, there's a lot to know and to learn and that sort of thing. And when I'm focusing with you, if I were focusing with you just on the numbers, it takes me away from actually focusing on the emotion. It's one of the things that when I work with people, like in the financial therapy piece, is actually helping really look at and assess the body language. I give a talk with financial planners, and it's on body language. And I said I can learn at least 4 things about you just in the handshake. And the purpose of that in the financial planning is it's going to tell me how I'm going to work with you as a client, as far as, am I going to be more directive with you? Am I going to be more open and allow you to guide your own path? Is it just in that handshake I can learn which way to go with you? And so if I'm really focusing as the financial planner, all those little nuances, when I'm looking at the screen and focusing on the numbers, I'm really not focusing on the client in that regard. And so this is why it's really good to have 2 sets of eyes, if you will, because they're really 2 very different professions.
Mm-hmm. So now I feel like at a handicap, because we're virtual, I can't shake your hand. I would like to know 4 things that you could learn about me.
Sure. Well, there's lots of things that we can learn even over the screen, if you will, and that's an important thing. But yes, it is. I mean, when you're starting with a new financial client, and you're doing it via Zoom or some other technology today because of COVID and that sort of thing, there are a few limitations. But you can also pick up a lot in the inflection of the voice, the body posture, how they interact, how are they looking at, or not looking at the screen, things of that nature. You can pick up lots.
Got it. And it's always a constant reminder to look at the camera, not at the picture on the screen too. It's always difficult to do. All right. And so then do you get most of your clients from financial planners or how does that normally go? Where do you find the majority of your clients?
The majority of my clients come from my clients. Okay. I would say about 80% of my clients are referred by my clients today. As far as the financial planning ones are concerned and that sort of thing, the other place that I'm getting financial planning clients in addition to that are actually going to be from the Financial Therapy Association. People go to that website and I'm on there, and they look up my information. Those are the 2 major reasons. As far as actual planners are concerned, that would be my 3rd area of referral.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Got it. And so you've also mentioned something called experiential therapy. What is experiential therapy, and how would that differ from what someone might think of just as just general therapy?
Sure. Experiential therapy is where I'm going to actually work with you in order to tap into your subconscious. Because people think that conscious is actually involved in most decisions. Through brain scans and that type of thing, we've been able to determine that our conscious brain, the brain we think is in charge, is actually involved in about 1 to 9% of every decision you make. Your subconscious is actually involved between 91 and 99% of the decision. So this is where, if you want to take the emotion out of the money, which I hear people say you need to do, I can sell you anything. Mm-hmm. And that's a real important piece. And so with the experiential, it says, I'm going to help you emotionally feel what's going on in order to help open the door. In the financial therapy piece, I have actually created a number of different financial therapy workshops, if you will, and where I will actually use real money in the workshops. I've created 18 real money exercises that will get you the core of that emotion, like right now. Mm-hmm. And it's very powerful. It can be fun. It can be very revealing, if you will. But it's also not something that I'm sharing with anybody unless they actually they can demonstrate that they have the skill set in order to be able to do it. Because if you open that door that fast, you can really put someone into a shame spiral real fast if you don't know what you're doing. And so the point of the matter is, in experiential, I can guide you as deep as you want to go at the pace that you want to go. Or talk therapy, you're just looking at more of the surface type things and that sort of thing. And talk therapy research is showing is not really changing behavioral patterns. It changed it a little bit, but the real change comes on the emotion. And so what I do is this experiential, and also add a caveat of intuitive experiential, because what I'm going to do is help you see what your body is saying. Because when you understand what your body is saying, it actually gives you a choice to dig even deeper.
Okay. And so experiential, going deep. Yeah, I knew that we made decisions using our emotions and we justified them logically. I didn't realize it was only 1 to 9% of the logical part that was doing that.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little bit higher than that.
Well, so did I. It's very interesting. The conscious brain, the brain that we think is in charge, involved about 2 million pieces of information a second. Now you consider that's not a bit or a byte. That's a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
During that same second, the rest of the brain, of which our subconscious is part of, is involved in over 4 billion pieces of information a second.
That's a lot of pieces.
Yes, it is.
Good deal. Okay. And so, I've been meeting with a lot of clients, that have been, frugal for the most part of their life. And there's only been a really few that I would feel that changed that in retirement. Because, I've had the feeling that most people, if they are one type in their working years, they're frugal, they do a really good job of managing money, they're probably going to be frugal in retirement too. Or if they spend far too much while they're working, they're probably going to spend, too much in retirement as well. But I've had a few that were very frugal, but then they got into retirement, this big lump sum, and then they kind of went nuts for a little bit and did not follow the plan. What would you recommend in a case like that?
Well, that's an interesting case. So what I find is what you're talking about is they emotionally flip from frugality to becoming emotionally, the pattern was still the same though. In both of those, they really didn't matter. Mm-hmm. They didn't really have a good, healthy relationship with money. Okay, in either case. And so the real important piece there is to help them see, what does money mean to them? What is the value of it? What is its purpose and that sort of thing? And how do I show respect for this money by showing respect for myself? And so that's a deeper piece, if you will. But that's in essence what we want to do, is help them see that this money is a tool in order to respect them and take care of them the rest of their life. And so it's about a tool to be used. And this is where I talk with people more about spending plans, for example, than budgets. Mm-hmm. And so this way we have the spending plan in order to see how we're going to be utilizing our money as a tool.
Yeah, and the budget thing, that's always a hot topic of debate, I feel, because people feel like budgets can be restrictive. Whereas right. I try to help people understand, it's like, no, budgets can be very freeing. I mean, if you're afraid that a budget is going to be restrictive, so you're not able to spend your $100 a month on clothing, or you're not able to go out and eat as much as you want, I'm like, it's your budget. You can put that into the budget. You can put that you want to go out and eat a certain number of times. You can put that you want $100 in your clothing budget. That it's yours. So it's like, but now what you're doing is you're just telling every dollar where it's going to go instead of wondering where it went. Sure. You're controlling the money instead of letting it control you. So it's like, yeah, you can make it however you want to make it, as long as the resources are there. And once you know that they're there, let's do it. So cool. So yeah, I would like to get into now this whole idea of boundaries, and with your book, Setting True Boundaries, why is this important to set a boundaries? What can be the downfalls of not setting boundaries? And we'll just kind of open this door up and let you go.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, I see a basketball in the back behind you there. Yep. It's really interesting. In my book, I used in the introduction a little analogy about playing a basketball game. Imagine yourself playing a basketball game that has no rules. You can throw it to anybody. You don't have to dribble. You can tackle somebody. Imagine the chaos that would ensue if you didn't have those rules.
That would be like playing a new game with my son. He always makes up new rules as soon as something doesn't benefit him. And I'm going,
Yeah.
Well, this was not set up at the beginning. This was not agreed upon.
Yeah, that's right. But what's really interesting is when we do not have boundaries around finances or in relationships, it creates all kinds of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Boundaries are really about creating consistency and respect and safety, if you will. And around finances, around relationships, is really basically the same pattern. And so it's really about it's developing that safety and respect with that consistency. Many people talk about boundaries, very few people actually have them. I mean, a year and a half ago, Psychology Today, for example, had an article about boundaries, front page article. I read the article. They had no boundaries in there. They had limits.
Okay.
This is, and I share that because it's not to criticize the article. It's just to show how little people really understand boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
A true boundary has three things. Number one is the limit. And most people think that the limit is the boundary, but it isn't. It's just the limit. It's what I want to create for safety. Boundaries are used to create safety in our life and around finances. And if we are not feeling safe, that's why we create the boundary in that area. Number two is that it has consequences, both positive and negative consequences that directly relate to the limit that's been established. It's not bigger than, it's not less than, but it relates directly to the limit that you're wanting to establish. So you can make a correlation. Third, and most important, is follow through. If you do not follow through with what you say you're going to do, you do not have a boundary.
Okay, so the difference between limits and boundaries need limits. Can you give us an example of what would simply only be a limit, and then what would actually go further on into becoming a full-fledged boundary?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So when it comes to finances, a limit would be is I need for you to be honest about where you're spending your money, our money in a couple relationship. Okay, I see we have $100 out of the account here unaccounted for. Where did it go?
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a limit.
Okay, and it's a very vague limit too.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, very, very vague.
I need to be more honest. How do we do that? Yeah. How do we set up parameters to judge whether or not they are being honest? Yeah.
Sure. So a more clear limit is any time there is any money spent on that is more than $100 or more, mm-hmm. we will communicate about it. For example, a couple. I'm just throwing out.
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as that limit is honored and respected, we'll play through the positive consequence, which would typically be life goes on as usual.
Okay. Negative consequence would be we have a fight.
Well, that would actually be not so good. What I will do is I might say, I will not be communicating with you until I get an understanding, which means is that I'm going to, this could be a way of doing it. It's not, it depends on the couple and that sort of thing. For some couples, this can be helpful. For some, this wouldn't be a good one because, I like to shut down anyway. I'm not going to talk to you anyway, sort of a thing. And so it really is couple dependent. But if it's a couple that really likes to engage in that sort of thing, it can be very powerful experiences. I'm just going to be limiting my communication of just sharing what absolutely needs to be shared until we have this talk about what was going on. Notice that it directly relates.
Uh-huh.
Directly relates. And so then what happens is that the person that the boundaries being set with. If they choose the positive consequence, life goes on as usual. If they choose the negative consequence, we're going to have this limited. And it's going to be as limited as long as that other person isn't willing to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it only might be 2 minutes. It might be 2 weeks, sort of a thing, depending on the person, the situation. But this one is where they really are engaged in communicating with each other, and that's where it actually can be a effective.
Yeah. And what's interesting, that specific example that you gave is anytime there's a purchase of $100 or more. Early in our marriage, my wife and I had something like that. We went through Dave Ramsey's course, and I can't remember if that was one of the things that was recommended, but somehow we ended up having $100 as the number at that time, where if there was anything we were going to purchase that was going to be more than that, we had to have a conversation about it. We didn't have, positive or negative consequences that were attached to it, though. It was just understood that we were going to do that, and we did. And somehow we must have worked something out, because now I can just tell her, all right, honey, I'm going to buy this rental property, and she doesn't even ask how much anymore. And so we must have done something right there by setting those limits, and maybe they worked into boundaries. I can't remember. It's been a while since we were back there, but
what I'm hearing is you've created safety and trust in the relationship. So she trusts your judgment today because you've been able to prove it in the past. That's what I'm hearing.
Yep. All right. And so, yeah, that's good. And more boundaries. How would someone go about maybe setting boundaries? So, because this is what I've run across several times in my practice here, is that there could be some clients that would come in and maybe they're 10 years out from retirement. So it's not like dire straits at this. They got a little bit of time to make up, but I'll usually hear the conversation of they've put all of their kids through college. Now they have to play catch up, though, because they don't have any retirement savings. They basically put everything into saving for their kids at the detriment of saving for retirement. And so and obviously that means maybe there weren't some boundaries set. Maybe that was the boundary. But, what would you say? Because I feel, and this might be just, opinion. I worked my way through college. I got scholarships at first, and then didn't after a little while. And so had to actually get some loans, but I worked through college as well and ended up getting out of it with, I think, only about $15,000 total in debt. And so my parents didn't pay, 6 kids, farm income. You heard my first memory of money. We weren't loaded, obviously. So what would you say to someone who might be wondering whether or not they should pay for their kids' college, and it might have that same consequence? They might end up not having anything for their own retirement and have to play catch up later in life.
Sure. Well, there's a saying is that when we enable, we disable. Everything that we do is a teaching opportunity. So the question is if I'm paying for my children's college, what am I actually teaching them? And this is the piece that I think is really important is many of us have been taught or were expected, the government expects us to pay for our children's college. Well, it's a very codependent pattern because some of them may not be really beneficial. It was interesting. My grandfather, he had this story about a cousin, I think it was, that grew up in a rich family. And so his parents were paying for his college. And he wrote home once and he says, "No mun, no fun, your son." His dad wrote back, "Too bad, so sad, your dad." I thought it was very cute, and but there's a lot of information in there. Is that when we give, we develop a pattern of giving, and so the child expects that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I recommend around this is, if you really want to give to the child, have some criteria around it. As long as there's a 2.0 GPA or better, something of that nature, I will pay for your college at the end. Or some people pay for half of the college in order so that there's skin in the game for the child. Because really, if we're in if we're just paying for the college, we're enabling the child to expect that. Which means is that when we get ready for retirement, they're still going to be expecting more money. I worked with one client who's 75 years old, worked every day, every Friday. His kids would come over to the house and he would give them an envelope with their allowance for the week. And they were in their 50s.
Oh my God.
It's a little bit of an extreme, but it's an example. What are we teaching our children? And what I find is those that actually have paid for their college themselves actually have a much healthier relationship with money than those that have had it given to them. Now, I'm not saying that, you don't give to your children and that sort of thing. There are many ways to give to your children. And for some children, it might be actually the right thing to do. But it's really a question as a parent, what am I actually teaching in this action? Because every action and inaction we have with our children are teaching opportunities. And so that's the real piece. And that's the direction I typically go on that particular topic. What do you teach?
Yeah, well, that's good. And that's something that I've struggled to maybe find a balance with too, because growing up, not having any money, and then therefore knowing that I had to work for everything. And now in this, being financially, stable now, and still being able to instill in my son that ability to, you still have to work for this. It's like, I don't know if you ever watched the Cosby Show a long time ago, but there was a question that I think Theo asked. He said, "Dad, are we rich?" And he said, "No, son, I'm rich. You're broke." And I'm kind of trying to help instill that into my son as well. It's like, no, you do not just have an endless ATM machine in the form of me and mom. And it's like, you still have to work for this. And so he gets a very, very small allowance, but he has certain things that he can do to earn more money. And anytime he wants to buy anything like online, obviously he doesn't have a debit card or a credit card. He has to go get his cash, and he has to literally physically hand out money to me or mom in order to buy whatever it is that he wants. And so we're hoping that helps him understand, at an early age, that he still does have to work for things.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Makes sense.
I'm glad that you brought that up and made a distinction between, paying for college as possibly being a very codependent situation to be in, but then also saying you could still do it, but if you do it, put it in these parameters. Right. Establish some type of a criteria. Like if you keep the 2.0 or the 3.0 grade point average, then I will pay for the tuition, or I'll pay for the housing, or whatever it is, but you have that agreement set up. Then,
okay.
I like that. That would be a boundary, basically.
Yes.
A boundary. It's got the limit, it's got the consequences. And
that's right.
The third thing it needs is that follow through. Yeah.
Right.
So perfect. And let's see here. So this positive and negative consequence that you talk about, is that different than like a reward or a punishment? And if so, how do you make that distinction really?
Oh, it's very different. I grew up in a punishment reward system. And basically, I like to use the example of curfew. When I was a kid, I might come home 5 minutes late. One time, I might get off the hook. Another time I might be grounded for a month. Both of those is an example of punishment rewards.
Okay.
And both of them were dependent upon my parents' feelings at the time. It really had nothing to do with me being late or not. It really had to do with what they were feeling. When we do a punishment rewards or wall, it really is putting emotion into the decision. It not only that, I'm in the driver's seat. I'm the one that's in control as the parent in this case.
Mm-hmm.
With consequences, I'm letting you be in the driver's seat. I'm letting you choose. All I'm going to do is follow through with what you choose with your behavior.
Okay.
And so what that does is because you're making a choice, I don't have to get emotionally invested in this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It takes the emotion out of the decision. It diffuses the situation so it doesn't get escalated into a big argument or a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Because you chose this. I'm just honoring what you chose. And that's how I encourage people to share it.
Sure. Can you give us a few examples of what might be, let's use the curfew example, I guess, in this case, what could be a good, not reward, but a positive consequence and a negative consequence, and how you would use that, you're choosing this over that?
I actually did this with my granddaughter. She came out once and she came home, one night late, about 15 minutes late. I said, okay, tomorrow night you're choosing with your behavior since she choosing with your behavior to come home late, saying you really wanted to come home a half an hour earlier tomorrow night. So what was very interesting in this example, we did this, and it was very interesting is it's because she was a little defiant.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next night she was hanging out of her boyfriend's house, who's in this apartment that's locked down.
Mm.
And then she wouldn't answer her phone. So what she did is she automatically escalated the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what I say is that, it's really about you set the consequence that's just enough to get their attention.
Mm-hmm.
And typically that works just fine. I don't want to, I want to stay out, as long as I can. And so typically, well, in this case, you wanted to break it. And know that every boundary you set, it has to be broken for it to be a boundary.
I was going to say they're not just going to follow through with it the kid or whoever you set the boundary with are not just going to acquiesce without testing it.
Correct. Yeah. You bet. And that's even around finances. When you establish, I'm not going to be paying your apartment anymore. It's going to be tested, and so it's really about that consistency. So anyway, in this case, she goes and doesn't answer the phone. Mm-hmm. So now we're being disrespected. That was another boundary in this, so that she broke, and so we had to address that. So what we did is we called the police. They got into the apartment and escorted her out.
Nice.
Yes, and we didn't make a big deal. She made a big deal of it. Mm-hmm. That's okay. Get upset. Go let you have your diffusing of your anger and your sadness in your own room. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you, she never broke that boundary again.
Yep. That's fine.
And we did not have to get upset.
Uh-huh.
We didn't engage it. This is your choice. You chose it. We need to make sure you're safe. Mm-hmm. And so it's really about staying consistent on the reason, on that limit.
Yeah. And I like that. And I listened to you on another podcast of a friend of mine. And since I heard that difference or the your choosing language, I've started using that with my son quite a bit because he does have certain things that he needs to follow through with. And if he does, then everything goes great. And if he doesn't, then he'll lose screen time. There's a few different consequences based on how many times it has happened. And sure. Yeah, I will say you're choosing to get 30 minutes of screen time taken away right now by your behavior. So that's helped out already.
And I might invite you to consider tightening it just a little bit. And that is you're choosing not to use your screens for 30 minutes.
Okay.
And the reason is because that little piece is you taking it away, you're still having that power.
Okay.
Makes sense. And so once he understands he's choosing this with his behavior totally, that gives him the puts him in the position to to see I actually have a choice. And what is interesting is if he feels like you're doing a power play with him, then that's kind of seen as a punishment. And when I get punished, I'm going to try to figure out a way to punish you back.
Mm-hmm.
And as a child, it tends to be passive aggressive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we can do. So anyway, we want to take that out of there.
Got it. So not you're choosing to lose your screen time. It's you're choosing to reduce your own screen time by 30 minutes.
Yes. And it's a little thing, but it's a really important thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Will do. Got it. Okay. Let's see here. So I'm curious if there are different demographics where there's certain fiscal responsibility issues might be more prevalent than others, or are they just going to be different depending on where someone's at? Have you seen anything there?
Can you rephrase that question? I don't know that I fully understand.
Sure. It was basically just about if there are certain fiscal responsibility issues or maybe certain boundary issues around money that we might find with different demographics, or do you just find different boundary issues at different demographics, or what do you see across the spectrum there? What might be more prevalent in, like a well-to-do, a middle America, and maybe a lower income? Is there anything specific in those areas?
There's every place is specific, and I think it's really specific about not just their income levels or that sort of thing, but actually the environment they grew up in emotionally. Okay, and that's going to be the bigger piece. When you talk about the demographics in that regard and creating the boundaries and limits, I like that. I led a financial therapy workshop in Santiago, Chile once. And it was very interesting is I did this one money exercise. And I was blown away because in this exercise, everybody gave me their money. All of it. I wasn't expecting that because I've never had that here in America.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I says, well, how do I do this? We can't do exercise if they don't have any money.
I know. What do I do now? It's like they totally messed up my example.
That's right. And so I had them ask for their money back. Nice little request, I thought. So did the guy that was invited me down there. He thought, not a big deal. All the guys asked for their money back. And all the women swore at me and they said they will never ask for it back. I will tell you, we opened Pandora's box emotionally. And so what I say is in that culture and then that environment, women have to ask for money from their husbands. It was a huge emotional issue. It's not something that we have here in America. And I use that as an example because it didn't matter about demographics there. It was in all the social classes down there. The point of the matter is that they had a lot of emotional history around it that was different. And so when I talk about it, the demographics, I think, like the example that I gave earlier about, the not communicating piece as a consequence. I said for certain situations, certain relationships, every boundary, every consequence, every limit that we're creating is going to be specific upon that family, that relationship, that demographic. And so to say one size fits all, it just does not.
Awesome. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. So I think as we start getting closer to our time here, we're going to start going into some other questions here. But your book, so you've written a book about boundaries, and it's called Setting True Boundaries. And yes. What led you to write that book, and then where could people find it?
what led me to write the book is working with people. I find that there is some real limitations on creating change emotionally in relationships and creating more safety in the relationships. And what I found is that there is there are patterns that we're missing. I actually worked with the worst of the worst of juvenile offenders for a couple of years. Kids that had been arrested as much as 75 times.
Oof.
And so they're the ones that actually taught me about some things about boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting is they said, they wish that their parents would have set boundaries with them. And I asked, well, why? And their response was, because it would have shown me that I mattered to them, that they actually loved me. And they were questioning that. I found that was a very profound statement, and it was quite unanimous in the group that I was working with.
Mm-hmm.
I said, now tell me, if they set the boundaries, would you follow them? And they said, hell no. You do not have a boundary unless it's tested.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so anyway, with that and looking at the patterns and relationships that I've worked with people in counseling, this is where I realized, people talk about boundaries all the time, but they really do not understand them. And so this is where the impetus of writing this book came from.
Okay. So do you ever get, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You said where you can get this. You can get it online. We're going to offer a couple books through your office, as however you do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the way that you would get a copy of David's book, Setting True Boundaries, would be just go on to Apple iTunes or wherever, leave a review for the episode. And then once you've left a review, just copy and paste that into an email with your address, and we'll ship that to you. So we'll make sure that you can get a copy of that. Okay. And so a question real quick though. So you've had those that have said, I wish my parents would have set more boundaries or set boundaries, period. Have you ever run into the opposite? Have you ever run into someone who's like, my parents set too many boundaries, but maybe they weren't really boundaries. Maybe they were just limits, right? So you run into that.
Well, you hit it right on. No one has ever said my parents have set too many boundaries. Well, I mean, when they said my parents are too mean and restrictive, now that's a different piece.
Yeah.
So what's interesting though, I have actually had parents and children come in and we work on establishing boundaries, and you think, God, the kids are really going to hate this. But what I have consistently found, it isn't the kids that hate it, it's the parents, which really blows me away. I have the greatest resistance in creating boundaries with the parents, much greater than with the kids. And once I've been able to get the parents on board, the kids actually come into compliance rather quickly and things change. I have an example where this child was being very acting out and running around and doing all the things. And the parents are just at a wit's ends and saying, how do we do this? And so I listened to what the issues were. And so we walked through and I made some recommendations of shutting things down, and behaviors and patterns. And the parents were the most obstinate on doing the change. The child said, yeah, that sounds good to me. What was interesting is she challenged it, but once she knew the parents were doing it, she got into compliance. And things totally changed within that family. And so she was able to get some of her, screen time back and relationship things that she wanted. It was very interesting, but they got it back where they got the family back together. So it's really powerful.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, good. Yeah. So we'll make sure that, and for those, like if we get to the limit of how many people order that, you can always reach the book on Amazon, I assume, as well.
You can go to Amazon, you can go to my website and order it through my website, which is jetsoncounseling.com. and you can order it through the bookstore, wherever you want. It's available. Right now, I am in the process of creating an audiobook for it. It is in its final stages right now. I'm supposed to have it in a digital format. I just haven't had time.
Mhm.
But one of these days I'll get it.
Sure. Good deal. Well, then, are there any other books that you would recommend on this topic, or any of the books that you have written on maybe on any other topics that you would recommend?
Well, if people really want to get to understand the emotional issues around money and that sort of thing, and the patterns associated with it, my book, Finding Emotional Freedom, actually talks about the patterns from an emotional perspective. It's the same perspective financially. You can just put the financial piece into each of the equations to be able to understand a little bit more about that. As far as, the Ted Klontz and Rick Kahler wrote a few books, and Brad Klontz, Ebony, the wisdom of the financial wisdom of Ebenezer Scrooge is an example for that. There's the Mind Over Money, that Ted and Brad wrote. So anyway, they've got some books on, the emotional piece of like finance, the conscious finance. Rick Kahler and Kathleen Fox wrote as well. Those are some books that are industry standards in this area.
Most interesting title, I think, so far had to be The Financial Wisdom of Ebenezer Scrooge. It was
Sure.
normally hear that. All right. So yeah, we'll link to your book, obviously, both of them there, and then any of the other ones that you mentioned. And also, I have a question for you, since a lot of my listeners are either in retirement or very, very close to it. What would you say would be your definition of retirement? So, David Jetson, if you ever plan on retiring, or what do you think would be your definition of that?
Retirement is being able to enjoy the beauty and the fruits of your labors from your youth and into present day, and being able to really enjoy the fullness that life has to offer us, that God has created in everything, and being able to live it to the fullest, and being able to enjoy life, enjoy kids, enjoying grandkids, great grandchildren, that type of thing is how do I live the legacy of actually living? That's retirement for me.
Awesome. Appreciate that. And yeah, I feel like that kind of goes right along the lines of what you're talking about, the freedom to be able to enjoy all of that, and the mindset, and I guess the emotional freedom as well. So great. Well, what would be something that you would like to see? Like, so let's fast forward 20 years from now. And is there anything that you would like to see considered absurd? Or maybe said another way, 20 years from now, you look back and say, man, I can't believe that we used to do blank, or that we used to just blank. What do you think that would be?
Well, I think if I were to say anything, it's really about having us see the value and importance of actually feeling our emotional truth. We have been taught to hide our emotional truth. And what's interesting is, in doing that, it creates all the chaos in our life, both personally and financially.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about, if we're able to get into the emotional honesty and the emotional congruence, I believe that there will be a lot of different things that would change in our society today. The way we are wired, that's the way God made us, is to feel. And what I find is when we feel is when we deal, so we can heal.
Okay. So now you're in the business of, giving advice to help people overcome some of the, the issues that they may have. What would be some of the best advice that you have actually received in your life, do you think?
Basically what I just shared is connecting with my emotional truth. Yes, that's where I matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, I would have to say, the more I have connected with my emotional truth, the more my life has come to life. And it's what allows me to do what I do today. It's because of my own personal.
Being able to live your authentic self.
Well said.
Yeah, good deal. Okay. Well, then, would you mind sharing, you've written a couple books now, you've got a successful practice. Is there any habits, any specific habits that you feel have led to your success?
Discipline. I think that's really important. That's what boundaries are really about, is creating discipline, consistency. If in my financial practice, it's been the discipline of setting goals and following through with them. Having discipline, and not just the discipline about doing it, the discipline of celebrating the successes. What I find is in society as a whole, we don't celebrate enough. And it doesn't have to be a big ordeal or anything like that. An example I like to use is I'm trying to pay off my house early. So every month, the way my wife and I celebrate is I get the statement that says, we only owe this much money on our house. And that's the way we celebrate, because we see it decreasing every month. We didn't have to spend any money on it. We didn't have to go out and make this big ordeal, because many times those big ordeals really turn not into wonderful celebrations.
Yeah.
It's really about having a special recognition. And so I think celebrating is a big one.
Yeah, definitely. And once again, type A personality, stuff like that, it's something that I've had to learn to do as well, is celebrate the wins, even the small wins, celebrate the wins, because we get so busy just going on to the next thing. We're like, all right, we hit that. Let's move on. Yep. Let's create a new goal that we're not going to celebrate.
That's what creates the internal tension. And it also creates the boredom in our life, if you will. The burnout patterns is when we don't celebrate, we don't have that accomplishment. It doesn't give us something to strive for again.
Yeah, because then it's like, well, what are we doing this for if I can't enjoy what I'm doing? All the goals that we're hitting and the success that we're having, what's the point?
Yes.
Oh, great. So I guess we'll end with a parting piece of advice, or any other place that you feel like people can connect with you. They can find you online, and so where they can find you, and then one last piece of advice that you might give my listeners.
Okay. Well, you can find me at jetsoncounseling.com. You can do a search on me. I'm fairly easy to find on Google and that type of thing. Find me through the Financial Therapy Association. Like I said, jetsoncounseling.com. livingtrueinc.com is another website that I have for my talk, presentation, workshops, and that type of thing. What I find most important is to appreciate all the wonder that God has created in our life, and appreciate it with our finances, with our words, our thoughts, our deeds, our feelings, and our actions. Is how do we really live? We only have one life. Let's live it to the fullest.
Definitely. Great piece of advice. Appreciate that. Yes. All right. Well, David, I'd like to thank you again for coming on here. I think you're going to help rescue some retirements in the form of helping them establish good boundaries if they haven't, establish maybe even better boundaries, even if they have had some good ones. And that therefore that's not only going to affect their lives, it can affect their kids' lives, even their grandkids' lives. So appreciate the time that you've taken here. And once again, we'll link to those places, the websites that you mentioned there on in the show notes. We'll make sure that we'll have links to the books as well. And like I said, for anybody that does want a copy of his book, Setting True Boundaries, we will have a supply on hand to where you just simply leave a review for us, and then copy and paste that review in an email to us, include your address, and we'll just ship that right out to you. So that's it. All right. You bet. Thank you for coming on here. You enjoy the rest of your week.
I intend to.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Bye-bye.